Friday, July 4th. I'm going to move around here a bit. Happy Independence Day to our American neighbors to the south. And the Stampede kicks off today. I gotta love the Stampede, the biggest or the greatest show on earth, isn't that what it is? Federal debt balloons. EU drops the industrial carbon tax. Is God making a comeback? And is BC out of money and ideas? Lots of questions. We'll get the answers, or we're going to try to get to the answers. I'm Jim Check with Now Media. With me, Ian Burns. Again, a beautiful sunny day here in the Okanagan. July 4th, big day for the United States of America. We just celebrated our birthday on July 1st, so our birthdays are very close together. We just hope we can get closer back together. But that's the big headlines for sure. And how are things in our nation's capital after the big birthday celebration out there?
It's beautiful actually here. It's a perfect day. About sort of 25 and sunny.
25
Ideal.
and sunny. There you go. Sunshine across this great nation. And there you go. And we'll kick it off with the Americans' big day. It's a big day. Trump will be having the signing of his big, beautiful bill at about 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then he's going to have some B-2 F-35s and F-22s fly over Washington to honor that successful Iranian strike, Midnight Hammer. That's going to be happening. And we got a little clip here to show the celebration of the United States of America. It's a big deal down there. It's a big party. We showed that clip yesterday of the girls in Toronto on Party in the USA, Miley Cyrus song. But so here's their idea of a party. It's a little bigger than what goes on here, so maybe we can take some tips from it.
In the proud spirit of America and in the proud spirit of our great country,
I just got three things to say. God bless our troops. God bless America. And gentlemen, start your engine!
You want to leave that sound. That's good. There you go. Midnight Hammer bringing the thunder. Happy birthday, United States of America. And we have our own big show.
These Americana videos that they like to make for TikTok or whatever the hell it is. They so frequently feature music by British or, in that case, Anglo-Australian bands, which I just find so hilarious.
Like, nobody makes better music than the Brits,
on top of one of the others.
The Brits own the music. I think, again, there's no better music in my mind than some of the greatest bands on earth.
I'm sure they would put Born in the USA Beatles, on top of it, but they probably have read the lyrics by this point.
Mick Jagger and the Rolling Stones. And then the greatest show on earth here kicks off today in Calgary. And Canadian Great leading that as well. The parade's going to be led by none other than our own Shania Twain. And then she grew up there in Ontario, in Timmins, Ontario, big mining town. And that's where Shania Twain came from. Big mining town in Ontario, Timmins, one of the more famous mining camps in all of Canada.
Yeah.
And it's the Old West.
I think she's been back very often, though.
It's the Old West, though. Nothing like Stampede. And I'm sure Pierre Polyv will be there with his cowboy hat on, all cowboyed up. And anyway, Shania Twain is 59. I took photos of her just when she was in Kelowna that's probably like 3 or 4 years ago. She still rocks it, right? Shania Twain. They expect to see about 300,000 people lining the streets at Stampede there. It's a great show. Have you been to Stampede yet?
Sadly, no, and I'm very keen to get there. Just so I can have a cowboy hat. That's the priority. Maybe some spurs as well, just so I can kick someone.
You got to get some boots. I don't know about the kicking someone, but hey, the boots. It is an amazing kind of like show. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I like that sort of thing, and I would like to see it, but I don't. They do bull riding, don't they? But is there anything else they do? Oh, they also do that the buggies, don't they? The races, which is kind of
Yeah,
cool.
they do bull riding and they do bronc busting, and they do it all. Yeah, chariot race, not chariot races, but chuck wagon races, all that stuff. I have friends that are chuck wagon racers, and yeah, and then plus they have tons of other stuff that goes on there at Stampede. They have a big fairgrounds, and there's lots of food to eat, lots of cultural food, all kinds of stuff, like something for everybody actually. And hey,
well, even Mark Carney, who's going to be there at 6:30 local time, his office tells us.
Pancakes too. Mark Carney will likely be flipping some pancakes at the event, as will Pierre Polyv. Justin Trudeau couldn't flip a pancake, so Mark Carney we see could. He's a much better pancake flipper than Justin Trudeau ever was. So there you go.
He's also a better flip-flopper than Trudeau ever was. He likes to flip-flop, whereas Trudeau took his unpopular policies to the grave, didn't he?
He likes to do a lot of things better than Justin Trudeau, including increasing the debt. Trudeau looked like he was like going to win that race, and here's Mark Carney going to show him who's boss in the debt thing. Federal deficit could average over $78 billion over 4 years. This think tank warning. Yeah, that's that next slide there. There you go. No, not that one. One more. I think we forgot a story there. That's why. We're going to go back. We'll go back, and it says, keep babies away from the Stampede. That's what doctors warn. So doctors warn parents to keep their babies away from the Stampede. The risk of contracting measles. There are more than 1,000 reported cases of the disease in Alberta. So there you go.
Sad, but I guess good advice, probably.
Yeah, and then back to the federal deficit. Mark Carney's $78 billion over 4 years. That's what the think tank warns. Yikes.
Yeah, I mean, that's abysmal, isn't it? When you consider what that will mean for the national debt, which is the important bit. The deficit is not really that important immediately anyway. It's the debt that matters, because that's what you have to pay down. You have to pay interest on it, and you have to pay it back. And sadly, Canada's starting to become like all the other failed nations in the world, in Europe and all the rest of it, who they owe in interest and debt more money per year than they spend on things like health and defense and all kinds of massive, necessities for any country. And it just keeps getting worse and worse and worse. And Mark Carney, the financial wizard and genius as he advertises himself to be, looks like he's going to add more debt to that gigantic stinking pile than anyone, even his predecessor, who was rather spendthrift.
That is his kind of MO, though. Like when he was in the UK too, easy money policies. That is part of Carney's kind of makeup is spread the money around, and hopefully it stokes the economy. But sometimes that doesn't exactly happen. All you do is create a wall of debt, and the UK is still reeling in that mess here. We actually had the finance minister in tears there the other day in the United Kingdom. King Arthur would be, shocked to have, one of his knights there crying at the round table.
Well, yeah. But the idea behind this quantitative easing and throwing money around, the sort of theory behind it is that you will achieve growth. The economy will kind of grow its way out of the debt, the bonds of debt. But obviously that didn't happen in Britain. Carney blamed Brexit, which is quite convenient for him. But it didn't happen, and it didn't really happen in Canada either. Not that he did the same. It wasn't the exact same set of policies in Canada. Very different jobs he did in both countries. But this is what people say. Like, we had this conversation yesterday, didn't we? Like, debt addicts always make that excuse. They always make that justification. Like, the growth will get us out of it, guys. It's like looking at it's like dealing with a crackhead. That's kind of how I feel about it now in policy terms.
Well, I would look at it this way as an accountant. I would say, like, if you use debt to spark investment by business, that's a good use. Like, use it as a spark, but not use it as the fire. Because, like, if it's just the government putting, like, during COVID, they gave money for people to stay home. That's not sparking investment. That is actually encouraging the opposite of it. And that's bad debt, right? And the same thing goes here. Unless we can figure out a way to attract people to come and invest in Canada and in our natural resources and give them certainty around, like the regulations and that, then we're going to have a tough time. And if we keep having to pour money into a fire that nobody wants to kind of pick up and fan the flames of, it's good money after bad. And here's good money after bad too. Global, good kudos on Global. They did a story. They did a 5-month in-depth story on this. They looked into the vaccine injury support program, and they found claims of office drinking, Netflix streaming, ping pong playing, and slushies while Canadians suffered.
What can you say? What can you say to that? They're not doing a very good job for the reputation of government workers, are they?
I don't send people to Global very often, but go there to globalnews.ca and read that story. And then somebody needs to be fired for this. Like, somebody needs to be held accountable. The minister, everybody, you know what I mean? Because these ministers need to be held accountable for this mess that they've allowed Canadian tax dollars to be squandered and not be taken seriously. Especially when we talked about that memo yesterday, when they were actually trying to suppress the actual truth from Canadians in these vaccine injuries as well. Somebody needs to be held accountable.
Well, that would be right, wouldn't it? I mean, this is what we've talked about loads of times. There's no punishment. And this is in politics, but it's also in government work. These people have power over our lives. They frequently make mistakes, sometimes very catastrophic, consequential mistakes, and they're never punished. More often than not, they're promoted. So I think it is actually a bit of an imperative that there is punishment and that justice is seen to be done, so to speak, to inspire the others.
This is like rubbing your nose in the pee. This is like, like claims of office drinking, Netflix streaming, ping pong playing, and slush. Well, Canadians died or were injured under this vaccine program. And this is ridiculous, especially, again, with that memo that we seen yesterday where they were actually told to suppress the vaccine injuries.
Yeah.
And then more news here. CMHC redefines affordable. There you go. Redefines affordable, right? Housing in Canada is so unaffordable. CMHC yesterday changed its definition of affordability. Canadians realistically should not expect to return to market conditions of 20 years ago, said the federal minister. And that's what you do when you're, same thing as if you're in a recession, you don't like the word recession. Let's redefine what recession is. As a result, we're changing.
Another example is if you do something racist, as we saw in the past, where people would do something racist, but the victim was a white person, so they redefined the word racism, made it so it was something to do with power. Complete fabrication that is just invented out of nowhere. I mean, how many times have we seen this done? How many examples? Another one is poverty. When you get these activists who want the highest possible percentage for the number of people in poverty. So they just keep changing what poverty is so that it can be higher and higher and higher and higher. And then they come to the government and they say, feed my NGO money.
Yeah, so we now use a more generic price to income ratio with an adjustment factor to account for changes in mortgage rates and homeowner expenses. This allows us to better monitor home buying affordability over time in all regions. Canadians should not expect a return to affordability of a generation ago. Restoring affordability to levels last seen 2 decades is not realistic, and that record was set in 1976. The loss of affordability over the past 2 decades has been large and is becoming larger, said the report. The supply required to return at that level of affordability would put an unrealistic strain on resources. Housing starts need to double over the next decade, wrote the researcher, compared to a projected rate of about 250,000 new homes. That's what typically happens right now. Canada needs to increase that to 430 to 480,000 units, right? So, and that likely is not going to happen. So change the definition. There you go. Much easier,
That's an easy
right?
win, isn't it?
Easy win. There you go. Change the definition.
But this is why language is so important, and this is why I might seem like an insufferable dweeb sometimes when I focus on words and the true meanings of words. But that's why it's so important, because language can be used to manipulate reality. That's how powerful language is, and that's what this is an attempt to do. And I imagine it'll probably succeed to some extent. And
then here's Ottawa. Ottawa opens a new transitional housing center in a vacant downtown office space, and so that's near Parliament. And that's going to be for asylum seekers, and it's going to cost the Canadian taxpayer about $5.6 million just for the building. And office is a few block away from Parliament, and the city's mayor, Mark Sutcliffe said the move is exactly the kind of creative solution that we need right now to solve Ottawa's housing and homelessness crisis.
I seem to remember there was a lot of discussion about this during the election, mostly from the blue side. The blue team were talking about doing this, but I don't remember them ever saying that it would be used for people who've come to Canada to claim asylum from wherever, and God knows how legit their cases are.
This is where this gets a little confusing, and they talk about here that it's going to be for asylum seekers, and the mayor says it's going to solve the homelessness and housing crisis. Like, what?
Yeah, it's just, I mean, Ottawa's, there really is a bit of a crisis in Ottawa, to be honest. And I'm sure there are a lot of people that look at this and say, what? Because asylum seekers, like, that's quite, again, talk about the power of words. Asylum seekers, it can mean a lot of things. It could mean like a full-blown refugee who, really is in desperate need of rescue, basically, and is like, a great person and all the rest of it. It can mean that, or it could also mean somebody that's got a plane to New York City, driven up to the border with Quebec, and just walked over, just an adventurer, basically, who's just said, "Oh, I'll come to Canada because I've heard they give you a house and life's a bit easier there." You see this in Europe all the time. You see it in England where they cross the English Channel. These aren't, they are asylum seekers, strictly speaking, but they're not like refugees. They're not the sort of people that you want to be spending millions and millions of dollars on to house. So when you look at this and you think of it in that light, it's a head scratcher. And it's, again, though, it's concealed within language. That's how you pull off that trick.
So the hot and cold safety rules are coming soon. The Labor Department says it's finalizing new climate change regulations for about 1.3 million workers in the federally regulated private sector. New rules would protect workers affected by the very hot and very cold temperatures. The labor program, so no date set for enforcement of new regulations under the Canada Labor Code. I worked in minus 50 plus all the time when I was working up north, so now they're going to say you don't have to work or what? Thermal stress in the workplace is when workers are affected by very hot or very cold temperatures. That's in the department report. Draft proposals.
Is this the right country to be introducing this kind of thing? God, nobody would ever work. This country has probably the most insane climate of anywhere on earth. In terms of like how high it can go and how low it can go. The variation is so unimaginable. It's insane. It doesn't happen almost anywhere else in the world. So that's 2 seasons at least where you can claim, that you can't work. But
draft proposals in 2023 suggested threshold limit values for work, especially for workers over 45. I guess that would include me. Workers who are 45 and older are at a greater risk from negative effects of exposure to heat and cold. As your workers age, their regular body processes tend to slow down. Put a bigger jacket on, especially if you're working in the north. I don't know anybody, when I worked at the mine site, nobody ever said, "Hey, seems cold out there today."
Maybe this is another problem for the robots to solve.
I remember being at the mine site there, and we had it was an underground mine, and they had the big ventilation fans, and the eagles would sit on top of the ventilation fans with their wings out so that they could take some of the heat from the underground, because we forced heated air down there because you wouldn't want to force the minus 50 air down there. So they just sat there, and you could actually walk right up to them, and they're just like, "Leave me alone. This is hot here," right? So, but yeah, they were all like kind of like frosty and stuff like that, and they were kind of like. Lots of wildlife hung around there because it was actually some warmth, right? Like because these big rings of fire, propane or natural gas, and you would actually force air through these big rings of fire, just like a circus, and you would force that air underground. And obviously, if you're forcing air underground, it has to come out too. It has to exhaust, right? Because you got to replace that air.
Yeah.
So those big exhaust fans, there were the eagles. They're saying, "Thanks for the heater." Lax immigration vetting makes Canada a prime target for Iranian infiltration. There you go.
Yeah.
We said that we did that yesterday as well when they said that Canada is ripe for this type of stuff, right? It's just like that the lax policies actually are just a fertile ground for this type of stuff.
Yeah, and I think this is society-wide. For once, this isn't just because of how stupid the elite in this country is and how incompetent they are. this is, I think this is society-wide. I think Canadians, for most of the well, basically all the history of this country, they've lived in a bit of a safety bubble where the only real threat has been the US
So this story talks about
throughout the whole
how
of history. So I don't think people are aware that there are very nasty people out there who will deceive you, and they'll come to your country, they'll pretend to be nice, and then they'll betray you. And that's what this is about.
So this story is, hey, slow down. We got to make sure we're vetting people. And the next story here says, like, hey, we got to speed this up. Group of academics call on Canada to speed up visa approvals for Palestinians. A group of academics in Canada has called on to speed up the approval of visas for Palestinian students, naming themselves the Palestinian Students and Scholars at the Risk Network. The activists said the federal government has an amazing opportunity here to step up its game and do something. Speed up, slow down, slow down, speed up. Yeah.
But this is, yeah, I mean, this is basically pressure, isn't it? It's almost like an ethnic lobby putting pressure on the government to do something that might not be in the interests of the Canadian people. I mean, you have to ask yourself the question, why is it that Egypt, among many other countries in the region, but Egypt used to be in control of Gaza. That used to be a part of Egypt. Why is it that Egyptians have a gigantic wall between themselves and Palestine, or Gaza in this case? And why do they refuse to take Palestinian refugees? What happened when Jordan took in lots of Palestinian refugees, or Lebanon, for example? Why don't you ever read about that? In the Middle East, in the Arab world, the places you'd expect to be most favorable towards Palestinian people, you will find the most hostility to the Palestinian people, and they refuse to take refugees. Yeah, you kind of have to look into why that's the case, and why in the same breath, why is it that Canada takes in many thousands of Palestinian refugees, or I should say Gaza, specifically Gazan Palestinians? The reality of Gaza is that it's they've been under the boot of a pretty sick dictatorship and Islamic theocracy, basically. They've been for 20 years, coming on 20 years now that they've been under their boot. And before that, they were in a pretty bad spot as well. I mean, it hasn't been a particularly happy century, really, for the people of Gaza. And social attitude surveys show that they have some very, very serious problems in Gaza, specifically with racism and extremism, Jewish hatred of Jews, and that kind of thing. It's you got to ask questions. I think it's not unreasonable to ask questions about a place like Gaza when it comes to this.
Pierre Polyv is running in that by-election, and he has to contend now with some Alberta separatists as he vies to get back his seat and get back into Parliament there as the Conservative leader of the official opposition. But Jeffrey Rath, the leader of the Alberta Prosperity Project, that group is trying to build support for an independent Alberta, which the province's premier says is an all-time high, and its support, a poll says around 30%. There you go. And he's accusing
some
Pierre
interesting comments in here about Polyv, because this is, I wouldn't say this guy represents the average Albertan. I'd say that would be wrong, and that poll seems to confirm that that's wrong. But he's got some pretty nasty things to say about him, where he says the dairy cartel mafia has gotten to Polyv. He's not going to touch supply management, something that we've spoken about loads of times, specifically Polyev's almost like embarrassed support of supply management, which you can't possibly believe in and be consistent. There's no way he could believe in that. And then he's accused here of pandering to Ontario and Quebec. And this chap says a lot of Albertans are sick of it, which I can believe. It really feels like change is happening in Alberta, though. It seems like they're becoming a lot more aware of their power, to me anyway, looking at it from the outside. They seem to be, they're aware of how important they are to Canada, and they're aware of how unfair this system is for them specifically. And yeah, I mean, he's saying we aren't overly impressed with Pierre right now. I can kind of believe that. So it'll be interesting to see. I mean, he's still going to win. I would be astonished if he didn't win. But this is more a question of what happens at the next election. Does he carry these sorts of people, or does he let them down again?
Well, he's going to win the hat contest too, but I'm going to bet that Mark Carney is not wearing a 10-gallon hat like that. So
I wonder if Mark Carney's going to wear as much foundation as Polyv is wearing there,
but
or seems to be wearing.
that's quite the hat he's got on there. I like that hat. That's a true Calgarian hat if I ever seen one. I actually have a hat like that, right? If you're going to go to the Stampede, best get a real hat. Let's see what Mark Carney shows up for a hat. I'm going to bet he doesn't even wear a hat.
I'm sure he'll have a good one.
I don't even think he'll wear a hat. I don't know. We'll see. And you can bet that Pierre's going to wear the hat and the boots. And I can guarantee that, almost guarantee that Mark Carney will not be wearing the boots. Unless he's watching right now. He's like, quick, get me some boots.
Will Carney have his Oilers paraphernalia on? Would he dare do that in Calgary?
That would be a bad idea in the Stampede grounds. I was going to a game there recently, and I'm an Oilers fan, and I had my Oilers hat on. My buddy was with me. He had his Calgary Flames jacket on, his blazer. He had a Calgary Flames. He actually grabbed the hat off my head, threw it back in, and shut the door. And he said, "You're not wearing that hat there. We're not getting any fights tonight." There you go. And this is big bad news for Mark Carney and the Liberals. The EU just nukes the carbon tax on 90% of their industries. So that's going to be a big blow for the climate agenda here. And so, yeah, EU lawmakers agreed to exempt about 90% of the companies from their carbon industrial tax, import carbon tax. So there you go. Ouch.
Yeah, it is a bit of an ouchie, isn't it? After he said he basically justified his attitude towards carbon taxes
with the EU.
by saying that the Europeans do it, so we want to be friends with them.
Because the Chinese don't do it, the Americans don't do it, India doesn't do it, and then so the only person you could buddy up to is Canada going to stand on its own? And Canada's we've done that we've kiboshed or self-sabotaged our own economy, and that's why we're in the spot we're in. That's why we talked yesterday about the tale of two nations, where we have one with inflation falling and the unemployment rate falling, and here in Canada, it's the opposite, right? A tale of two nations. And we can't get people to invest here.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. And the comparison is pretty stark as well, isn't it?
Usually when that much investment was happening in the United States, as their cup filleth, it runneth over. Some of it would runneth over here.
Not this time.
But now it's like they would look elsewhere other than here. Like, you know what I mean? The world is more globalized in some ways and less global in many other ways. And then Trump's big, beautiful bill, or as the Democrats call it, the big, ugly bill, whatever you want to look at it. But the ICE is now almost has the same budget as Canada's military. So ICE is going to be huge down there. ICE is going to be like a massive, and it's actually bigger.
If this is accurate, then it's more than 3 times the size of Canada's military budget, isn't it? But I don't know if this is accurate, but yeah, I mean, it's crazy, isn't it? That the amount of money that they're giving to that. But it shows that he's serious anyway. And some of it's for the wall, I believe, as well, isn't it? I don't know if that's a separate, a separate fund or what, but there's a lot of money to build the wall.
And then that budget, like we said, it passed, the House of Representatives passed that bill in a narrow vote. I think it was 218 to 214 or something like that. And it raises the U.S. debt ceiling by $5 trillion. Like, our debt is bad, but I mean, you got to look at the size of their economy, their size of their population, their size of their industry. It dwarfs Canada, so there you go. And plus, they get to export. They get to export their inflation with being the world's currency. And, again, we played that little clip in the beginning there showing off their military might. That gives them license to do a lot of things that most nations do not have license to do. That military, they invested in their military, that gives them the hammer. And if they have a hammer, I don't know what we have.
Yeah.
Not
I don't know. Toothpick,
yeah, not a hammer, that's for sure. And then this one's a weird one. Yeah, you put this in here. Trump celebrates big, beautiful bill and promises UFC fight at the White House. I mean, I know he's a big fan of the UFC. Joe Rogan's kind of like baby as well. As Americans celebrate the 249th anniversary of the adoption of the Declaration of Independence, Trump is celebrating the passage of the tax and spend legislation named the Big Beautiful Bill. Elon Musk is working hard to try and start a new party now. He says he only needs 8 people. The president also said today that marks the start of a year-long celebration for the 250th anniversary of Thomas Jefferson's document which he said will be marked in 2026 by a UFC bout on the grounds of the White House. So that's not happening this time. It's going to happen in 2026, I guess.
I'm sure Thomas Jefferson would approve of that.
A UFC fight? Maybe King Arthur would approve of a joust or something like that, but I don't know.
Yeah, a joust, that would work.
And here we have Donald Trump on the tarmac here as boarding Air Force One. Here, we're going to play this clip here for you.
Vietnam yesterday. Great deal, 40% on transshipping. Can we expect any more of that before next week, sir?
So we have a couple of other deals, but my inclination is to send a letter out and saying what tariff they're going to be paying. It's just much easier. We have, far more than 170 countries. And how many deals can you make? And you can take good deals, but they're very much more complicated. I'd rather, and I've been like this from the beginning, I'd rather send out a letter saying this is what you're going to pay to do business in the United States. And I think it'll be well received. I think it's just so many countries. And then they go specific. Let's do this, let's do that, beef, ethanol. And I'd rather just do a simple deal where you can maintain it and control it. You're going to pay a 20% or a 25 or 30% tariff.
You brought in a record amount.
We're going to be sending some letters out starting probably tomorrow, maybe 10 a day, to various countries saying what they're going to pay to do business with the U.S.
Hopefully Canada's not on the letter thing and we actually get a deal, not a letter in the mail. It's kind of like, when you apply for college or university and you get that letter and says, thanks for applying. No.
Well, I did hear the ambassador to Canada, the American ambassador to Canada, did a radio interview with CBC this morning, and don't know what to read into this, but he said, I'm sure that Canadians will be very satisfied and happy when a deal is announced. So, and I've heard language like that from lots of insiders. So I assume that we're not going to get one of those letters, but you never know, really, do you, with Big Don?
We don't want a letter, and we don't want the last deal either. The last deal is going to be the worst deal, right? So
I do like because they were talking about Vietnam there, weren't they? I do kind of wonder what the sense is. I can understand why the transshipment thing would be annoying, but what does Vietnam produce that the Americans want to produce at home? It's like Vietnam's a place for like cheap electronics and T-shirts and stuff like that.
Textiles is the big one,
I just
right?
don't get it. It's like the Americans aren't going to make that stuff at home. So all this does, that 20% tariff, it just makes T-shirts 20% more expensive, basically. So what's the point? I don't quite understand, unless he knows something about technology that we don't know, that the T-shirt factories are on the horizon or something.
There's big margins in those apparels on textiles, because like Costco is being sued by Lululemon right now because they're selling, like Lululemon sells those for 100 plus, some of those, like yoga pants and jackets and stuff like that.
Yeah.
Like Costco's selling them for
like way over 100, yeah.
Yeah, and Costco's selling for like $20, $25, and they're saying that the quality is the same and and it looks the same, so they're suing them and saying they infringed on their intellectual property. And then some people on TikTok are saying, well, thanks for outing Lululemon.
Yeah, for sure. And then there was loads of Chinese people on TikTok or whatever coming out, weren't they? And they were showing how they manufactured the supposedly luxurious items.
Cheap,
yeah, for nothing.
There you go. And then is God making a comeback? According to the Speaker of the House, God is on the comeback trail. I'm going to play this clip here.
Those words up there, that motto, it says, "In God we trust," right above the Speaker's rostrum. A previous Congress put that there in the early 60s in the height of the Cold War. There's a little visitor's guide that people get when you do tours late at night. You've probably seen your constituents and visitors and friends get the guide. If you turn, I think it's about to page 21. It explains why that's there. And it says, Congress voted to put that there as a rebuke to the Soviets' worldview at the height of the Cold War. Why? Because communism, socialism, find their root in Marxism. And Marxism begins with the belief that there is no God. It's wrong. And this Congress made us stand those many years ago, and we should do it again. We're different, we're distinct, we're exceptional, because we acknowledge that right there, our motto. It doesn't say, "In government we trust." It says, "In God we trust." And we better remember that. He has blessed us with his grand experiment in self-governance now for almost 2.5.
There you go. Your rights
Yeah.
come from God. He goes on to say, your rights come from God, not from government. I don't know, like if you would say that here. I mean, we've done a lot of work here in Canada to kind of like remove God from a lot of our stuff.
You can't ignore the fact that this country is built on Christianity, though. I mean that very literally as well. Like that, if all you've got to do, go to any museum in this country,
Yeah.
and look at anything that was done, built, said, whatever. Almost certainly, it involved a Christian religious group. That's just kind of how the Western world was just like
What's
that.
what's the
You know, in
biggest
the 19th
holiday of the
century
year?
and early 20th century.
What's the biggest holiday of the year?
Truth and Reconciliation Day, obviously.
Okay. The second
No,
biggest
I'd say
holiday.
it's got to be. If it's not Canada Day, then it's got to be Jesus Day, also known as Christmas.
I don't even think most people know that that is what it's all about. But anyway. God's making a comeback in the United States. Will he make a comeback here?
I don't know. I think Canada's an extremely secular society now, isn't it? It's a very liberal society as well. Like I've said before, that I'm convinced it's almost certainly the most liberal country in the world, and one of the most secular, one of the most irreligious. Although irreligious is the wrong thing to say, because instead of Christianity or Islam or whatever, people just follow other religions, such as, you know, the Greta Thunberg religion. And
I was going to say that religion is huge here. That religion is huge here. And we have what's his name? Stephen Guilbeault would be, he would definitely be, one of the high priestesses of that.
He's a druid of that religion.
There you go, a druid. Harman Bangu, we're on to BC News here. He's saying Katrina Silic is exposing what politicians won't. Drug cartels have a foothold in Canada, especially here in BC. We're going to play this little clip here.
I had an individual reach out to me who was an operative for the Sinaloa cartel working in Canada, running these labs. Mm-hmm. And he showed me the labs that the Sinaloa cartel is operating with.
Physically?
Yeah.
Where are they putting them?
They're putting them in suburban sort of. So they're particularly in the West Coast, in BC and in Alberta, which is like a prairie province. And so there's a lot of farmland and it's residential. And prior to this, it was meth labs that they had running out there. And there would always be like a random meth lab explosion in Abbotsford or, this is like a smaller city. And then these turned into fentanyl labs that were completely under the radar because we also didn't have Canadian law enforcement like patrolling these areas to an extent that they would patrol like a large city like Vancouver or Toronto. So you're bringing in precursors from the Port of Vancouver easily because less than 1% of cargo that comes into the Port of Vancouver is actually inspected by authorities. Or
less than how much?
Less than 1%.
Less than 1%?
That is an official number, yes.
Falkland.
I mean, it's happening all over the place, isn't it? Yeah. Not just Canada, but that is.
We did see that big bus
true.
In Falkland here, which is in the just north of us here, on the way to Kamloops. Big bus there. Meth lab.
I mean, sometimes when they're in suburban areas, the police only find out about them when they explode, because somebody makes a mistake while cooking the drugs or whatever. I mean, sometimes as well, it's power supply, isn't it? They find that there's a house or a farm or something is using like a ridiculous amount of power, and then they go and check it out, and it's because they're. I mean, I think that's often with cannabis, but I suppose that's also true with other drug facilities. But how could you? I mean, we don't have a society where everybody's houses are raided by police or whatever. It's like how could you know? This is one of the many examples of where rather unpleasant people exploit our beautiful way of life that we have here with certain liberties and whatnot.
And this one here is from Steve Cooner, MLA here in British Columbia. When I was sounding the alarm 4 months ago on the problems with supportive housing in Richmond, Minister of Housing dismissed me and accused me of demonizing vulnerable people and scoring political points. Now this minister finally acknowledges the truth shame it took this long. Well, Richmond residents continue to live in fear. And we won't play that clip. I was going to play that clip. We're going to play this next one here from Dr. Anna Kindy. The BC government has run out of money, and to compensate for this, they're rationing healthcare services. We're going to play this clip here. She's another MLA here in British Columbia for the Conservatives. Let's play that clip from Dr. Anna Kindy.
Named a health critic, I was shocked to learn just how badly British Columbia ranks when it comes to providing life-saving medications for rare diseases. BC is near the bottom in Canada. Take short bowel syndrome. There are about 32 kids in BC with this condition. They can't eat normally, so they rely on something called TPN, or total parenteral nutrition. That means being fed through a tube straight into your bloodstream. It carries risks like liver failure and life-threatening infections. There's a medication that helps these kids eat and potentially get off TPN. It's covered in every province in Canada except BC and PEI. And PEI has no cases of short bowel syndrome. Not a single child in BC with short bowel syndrome is currently receiving that medication. Our entire healthcare system is collapsing under the weight of bureaucracy. We see the results. Pediatric units shutting down in tertiary care hospitals. Emergency rooms closing for days and sometimes weeks. Patients sleeping in the emergency hallways or being treated in storage rooms. So this isn't one department or one region. It's a system-wide failure, but we must begin fixing it now. That means listening to the front line, empowering communities, and learning from healthcare systems that actually work. Healthcare systems in Europe, New Zealand, Australia. British Columbians deserve care that's accountable, compassionate, and effective. Let's stop patching holes and start building a system that works for everyone, especially the most vulnerable among us.
There you go. And I did that story yesterday on, we're still working on it. I think we're waiting for a comment back from BC Transplant. I interviewed that young lady there that has needs a liver transplant.
Yeah, I mean, it seems to me that there's an inevitability now about the fact that the health system is going to have to be reformed in a pretty big way. Just seems, just like so many other things, just like, you know, that Carney was going to back down on the digital services tax and all the rest of it. All these things you can see in politics just coming, like the EV mandate as well. That's obviously going to be repealed or changed in some way. You can just see it with health, but it seems like the people involved would rather just drag their heels because they don't want to run the risk of getting it wrong and, you know, being punished for it in elections. But it just seems inevitable. I mean, it clearly is not working anywhere in Canada. And like she said, it is working in some places, like Switzerland, for example. I know Switzerland's a richer country than Canada, but you know, there are places where health systems look a bit
working better in
And,
Mexico. You can get Mexico.
Yeah.
You can get access to a doctor. You can get access to many doctors. We have Gavin Dew coming in at 10:30, and we're going to talk about the town hall that happened here on Tuesday, I think it was. Was it Tuesday or Wednesday? It was Wednesday.
Wednesday, I think.
Wednesday.
Yeah.
We're going to talk about that town hall. I mean, he was leading that charge for some changes at IH, and Susan Brown has since resigned. And we actually have this clip here. We're going to play this old clip from David Eby. We're going to play this clip here from David Eby. This is when he was in opposition. So listen to what Mr. Eby has to say then.
Speaker, this minister is setting records, a record number of tent cities across the province, including just up the street at the courthouse, a record high housing prices in an out-of-control real estate in Metro Vancouver, a record number of young people leaving Metro Vancouver because they can't afford to raise their families there. They're setting records, Honourable Speaker.
Well, he's breaking all those records.
I mean, if I was an MLA in the Conservative Party, BC Conservatives, I would just play that in
over and over
the question period and just see what his answers were. Like that would be my question.
So we have record debt, record taxes, record childcare failures, record numbers of people leaving BC over and over again. And to me, is the NDP running out of ideas and running out of money? I mean, that's like we're seeing cuts in healthcare right now because, you know, like there's some accusations being made to my MLAs that they got no money. And that's what that other doctor just said. They've run out of money. And I think they've run out of ideas. That's the big thing, because they've run out of ideas how to convince people to invest here in British Columbia, and even themselves. So this BC Ferry thing, which I think is going to be the biggest scandal for them, they ran out of ideas in that too. And we talked about this yesterday. Like they talk about, they stick up for the worker, yet they send a big contract, a huge contract overseas where there is unfair labor practices. So they send it there, and then they talk about Canadian steel and aluminum, and they send it to a place that they've already sent or given us inferior steel in the Patello Bridge, and they send it there when we need to build our shipbuilding industry, and they send away a huge contract that would go a long ways to build our industry.
Yeah, I mean, what a time for that to come out. Terrible. But yeah, like as we've said, this train will continue on its journey, I think, and we'll see a lot more stories connected to it, to the ship contract in particular. But I do wonder with the NDP, like that, obviously in many ways it looks like a sinking ship, doesn't it? To continue the nautical metaphor. But I don't know. When I saw them win that election, or we all saw them win that election last year, that kind of made me think it's almost like it doesn't really matter what they do to an extent, because they always have that like hardcore of people that will just never ever vote for a centre or centre-right party. Never. They'll never touch a party like that. They'll only ever vote left. And the NDP is really the only game in town other than the Greens, and they're just peripheral, really, aren't they? So it's almost like he wins by default because of the nature of the population in Metro Vancouver.
We talked about that even in the federal election, the provincial election, it goes as well, is it more of a pro-NDP vote or liberal vote or an anti-conservative vote? And I think, like you and I talked about it, it seems like lots of times it's just anti-conservative because there's so much, our media here in Canada has painted this picture of Trump, and then they just, Eby does it all the time. He tries to attach Trump to Rustat. That's what Carney did with, Carney Liberals did that with Polyv. They said he was going to bow down to Trump and he was going to be Trump's little minion and all this stuff, and actually it's
and
the
now it's
opposite
Carney
is true.
accused of bootlicking.
By his own liberal former cabinet ministers. And then I did Beyond the Ballot is back. Renee Maryfield is back after a 3-week break there. She's back. Great episode. You got to go watch it. It was mostly focused on British Columbia. We won't play a clip on it, but you can go on KelownaNow.com and you can find it, or you can go on Now Media. You're going to find it. But Renee, a former MLA, very well spoken and knows a lot of the issues and follows the stuff very well. I think, well advised to go listen to what she has to say. Great critic of this current government as well.
She also knows, she doesn't just know her stuff, but she knows people as well, doesn't she? She's got that, she's in the network. She has a large network of political friends, and I think that's useful.
She knows a lot of the back channel stuff for sure too, so she knows more than most. Another MLA here. Here we thought in the 1990s was BC decade of decline and unsustainable BC NDP spending and debt, but Eby in the 2020s, hold my beer. And if you look at the chart there, and it's the highest single year of debt here. And this just lays out all the premiers of the past year. If you look at this chart here, and it shows you, David Eby, like on the far right there, John Horgan. He's rather subdued, John Horgan, compared to Eby. And then Christy Clark, actually. And then Gordon Campbell actually had a downslide there. Look at Gordon Campbell. Other than his, Hawaiian drunken adventure there. There you go. And then old Van der Zam there. Look at that, Bill Van der Zam. And then Bennett, actually. And then way back to the other Bennett, right? There you go. Dave Barrett, wow. I remember that. I remember Dave Barrett back in the day. My dad was... creds. Yeah. My dad was really like that Dave Barrett guy. So there you go. And then Peter Millibar.
But what's this? It says the next highest ranking premier was Michael Harcourt, but that doesn't seem to. I can't see that on the graph. But that would be interesting if so, because he's NDP as well, isn't he? Or was NDP.
Yeah. And then Peter Millibar, reporter there, put this out too. No, sorry, not a reporter, another MLA. The level of debt growth is simply not sustainable. EB's collecting record levels of taxation, yet still racking up record debt. So yeah, some more. And this chart.
Oh, I see. It is, yeah, because the color scheme is just a bit weird. But yeah, I guess it is Harcourt there, actually.
Yeah. This is Peter Millibar, and this is the Fraser Institute that put out this graph here, right? So this is per person government debt inflation adjusted in BC reaches all-time high in 2025.
But that's just dismissed, isn't it? Straight away, it's like, oh, it's a right-wing think tank or something. It's kind of okay. I don't think that's true, really, of Fraser Institute, but they're more like libertarian, almost like lefty libertarian in some ways. But that's what happens, isn't it? This kind of thing is published, and then, oh no, they're just right-wing. Forget about it.
Right, dismiss it. Yeah, you just attach them just like they do for us, I guess. In the markets are rather quiet today. Quiet. Why? July 4th, the big holiday. So the markets are quiet. Bitcoin quiet as well. Everything's kind of quiet on this day. Everybody's busy, I guess, having a hot dog. Hot diggity dog.
Watching a firework.
Watching fireworks. Yeah, they got a big show down there. And someone says that you're going to buy fireworks from a toothless old guy in some kind of shed there, and you wonder why they're not safe. But here's the price of Bitcoin over the past few years of July, 4th of July. In 2009, 0. 2010, a penny. Somebody just sold, had a bunch of Bitcoin and just sold like $1 billion worth, and they'd bought it way back when. 15 bucks, and look at the climb here, 2011, 2012. And then when did CNBC say that it was dead? What year was that? Remember we did that a few days ago, and they said they did a funeral for it, an online funeral for it.
It was sometime in the teens, wasn't it, like 2017 or something, I feel like?
They basically called it dead. 2016, you could still buy it. This is less than 10 years ago. You buy it for 670 bucks. Look at today, banging on $110,000.
I mean, even look at 2020, which seems like yesterday to me. You could get it for $9,000. So you wouldn't have, I mean, 10 times, more than 10 times the return if you'd bought in 2020.
And here's a guy, I'm a fan of Chamath here, and here's what he says. If you think it's high now, wait. Let's play this little clip from Chamath here. Do we have it?
That the market does not want to buy the debt from the government. Rates are now climbing, and that creates a massive problem for the government.
Okay, Chamath, you've been tweeting about this.
I think we have to be careful here. This thing is like anti-Doge. And so what will the implications be as rates go to those levels? You'll de-lever from the United States. You'll sell U.S. debt. You'll own things like gold and Bitcoin. If you're curious about what's happening to gold and Bitcoin, they started to spike in the last few.
There you go.
Sounds like he's got some Bitcoin in his portfolio.
I think you're right there. And then we're on to our tech sector. Again, kind of slow day too, but Ryan Williams, the MP there, says EV sales in Canada are down 45% under the Canadian government's EV mandate. And this is the funny one. You and I talked about this yesterday. So the government says, turn off your air conditioner because otherwise you're going to cause the grid to black out. But drive an EV. You're just like, what?
And turn the air conditioner on when you're in the car.
You're not allowed to have you run your air conditioner, but you're supposed to drive an EV. And then you're supposed to buy an EV, but you can't buy a Tesla because you put it like the best Tesla or best EV. You can't buy that one because it's run by whatever a Nazi apparently.
Adolf Musk.
So it's kind of mixed messaging, no? Isn't it?
Which is the case in almost every area of policy that the Liberals are involved in. I'm sorry to say, but I mean, I'm not just the Liberals, because let's not forget the hypocrisy of Pierre Polyv on supply management, for example. They're all just full of inconsistencies and contradictions, aren't they? And that's kind of, to some extent, the nature of politics. But I suppose I would let Polyv off in the sense that he's not really in power, whereas the Liberals are. So their inconsistency and their contradictions actually have consequences for all of our lives. So it's a different level, I guess.
Sometimes people say we only hold the Liberals to account. Well, we hold power to account, and the Conservatives aren't in power. So, I mean...
And, no, I mean, I can guarantee that if it was the Tories in power, we'd be doing the same thing anyway. But I would also say that's true of the average person on the street as well. Even if the average person on the street is inclined towards the Tories, if they won an election and were in government for a few years, they would be whining about the Conservatives. That's just that, and that's right. That's how it should be, because you should scrutinize the people who have power over your lives. I mean, it's basic stuff, surely.
Stop calling me Shirley. This EV mandate has to end. That's an old airplane joke. I don't know if you remember that series.
Yeah, it reminded me. He's Canadian, isn't he? I believe.
He is Leslie Nielsen. There you go.
Yeah, he's brilliant.
Yeah, the EV mandate has to go. It's only a matter of time, and how is he going to walk it back, I guess, is the question. We've got this clip here to play from Donald Trump. He's going to be like, let's play this.
The biggest auto manufacturers in Canada met with Prime Minister Mark Carney to discuss how to survive Donald Trump's trade war. And as Olivia Stefanovich tells us, a key request is an end to electric vehicle policy that they have long opposed.
Facing an uncertain future, automakers arrived at the Prime Minister's office with a clear objective.
We'll be discussing EV mandates, of course, as well as a range of other policies to make sure the sector succeeds.
Since spring, the big three North American auto manufacturers have asked Ottawa to repeal its electric vehicle mandate.
Well, the EV mandate itself is not sustainable. The targets that have been established cannot be met.
Those targets require 20% of new car sales to be emissions-free by next year, then 100% of all new vehicles by 2035.
We're saying we don't want your cars, in all due respect.
With Donald Trump threatening the Canadian auto industry, more damage may be on the way with his so-called Big Beautiful Budget Bill, which includes phasing out electric vehicle tax credits from the Biden era. And with the U.S. and Canadian auto industries so deeply intertwined, it adds pressure on Ottawa to follow suit and pull back on its support for EVs.
At a time when we're in a tariff battle with the United States, to really impact our auto sector in this way would be very detrimental. So for a number of reasons, we absolutely oppose the EV mandates in Canada.
Will you drop the EV mandate? The finance minister won't say if the government is willing to go there.
We're always going to be there to support the industry and our workers.
The prime minister has made it clear he wants to land a new trade deal with Trump by July 21st.
We're doing what's necessary in order to get the best deal for Canadians, and we get the best deal for Canadians, we'll agree to it.
If there's no agreement by that deadline.
There you go. Francois Philippe Champagne with wise words as usual.
We always going to get the best deal for our workers. I'm sorry to mock the man, but it's just...
That's a pretty good impression.
He makes me laugh. He reminds me, I don't know if you've seen the movie The Room, which is considered to be the worst film ever made. But he sounds like the guy from that, Tommy Wiseau, who I've met. So I can personally testify that he sounds like Tommy Wiseau.
So right now, I'm sure Stephen Gibault and Francois Philippe Champagne are throwing stuff around in a room, screaming about how we have to hang on to the EV mandate. And I'm sure Mark Carney's in that room and saying, you know what, you just need to take a seat there because this thing's going. It's either you have a choice here. There is no automobile sector. And then, of course, Evan Solomon's going to stand up and say, well, we have this new Canadian car company that's going to build 2 cars a year for the next 3 years.
But at this point, it just makes no sense on any level. It doesn't make sense. Like, even if you are hardcore green, environmental left activist like Guilbeault or somebody like that, it doesn't make sense because it's not going to actually work. It's not going to do anything. It's not possible. It's like physically impossible to do this. So it doesn't even make sense on those terms. You know, it's the thing that I'm most interested in is why is Carney holding on to it? Who's he trying to? Because he's clearly using it as leverage for some reason, isn't he? But against whom? I don't really understand.
Care. The Americans won't care.
Yeah, it makes me think maybe are they doing it as leverage because they want to get some other green policy through, and they'll say, okay, we'll ditch this if you give us this, or is it? I just don't know. This is one of the. I'm not ashamed to say that. I just have no idea what his play is here. But I'm sure he has some rational reason for it. But I can't see what it is.
Well, just like Bill C-18, they just don't know how to say they were wrong. They just don't know how to go back.
Yeah, or you can only say you're wrong so many times, and he just did that with the digital services tax. So maybe it's about like spacing out your surrenders.
If you go back and play all the clips from. Champagne and Guilbeault and all these people in Freeland and all that stuff on this EV mandate, it just makes no sense to the realities of what's going on, because the Automobile Association has been saying this for a while. Like, they're supposed to be at 20% next year. There is no way. And Ford has already warned them, like, we're going to move to the U.S. Honda's already told them too. They delayed the building of that plant. So Honda's, like, that plant where they got tons of corporate welfare, right? From Ford and from Doug Ford, not from Ford, but from Doug Ford.
Ford to Ford.
And from the Liberal government. And this EV mandate, and I say the Liberal government, I don't say the government, because the Conservatives definitely we're going to kill the EV mandate, because it only makes sense. If you want an automobile sector in Canada, they preach and preach and preach how this is such a crucial industry for Canada. You are actually at the same time killing the industry by forcing this mandate on. Even the European Union is facing a lot of backlash on this too. Like, if you look at some places that are successful in EV adoption, like China, it's through innovation. It's not through punishment. It's through innovation. Like, they have tons of vehicles there that are being sold at cheap prices, and Tesla's one of those companies. But I mean, again, the only EV worth buying here at scale is the Tesla, and their punishment on that. So it's just ridiculous. Like, it's just like they're saying they want to build this great economy, yet they kind of like handcuff the greatest asset we have. It doesn't make any sense.
Not very little about how Canada is governed makes any sense to me. And I grew up and come from a country which is exceedingly dysfunctional in its politics. But Canada sometimes, like, the reason it's dysfunctional in Britain is almost like they don't actually have a lot to play with. They don't actually have a lot of tools that they can employ. So it sort of makes sense that it'd be dysfunctional. But then Canada's sat there just like, it's like Aladdin's cave over here in terms of the advantages that this country has. And the political class seems to devote most of its energies to trying to, getting rid of those advantages, or ignoring them, pretending that they're not there, or that they're bad somehow, morally bad advantages. But the thing about this EV mandate, what really baffles me, you were talking about Honda there. Honda and also Toyota make cars in Ontario, don't they? And I think it's the RAV4 and the CR-V, which are like the two best-selling cars in Canada. They're like both top 5 at least. And they're hybrids, but they're not plug-in hybrids. So they're extremely popular. They bring emissions down if you're into that kind of thing, but they're going to be banned. You're not going to be able to, or you're going to be fined if you try and sell them, because they're not plug-in. Yet this ridiculous mandate, they have to be plug-in hybrids or full EVs. I mean, why would you do that? Your own industry, your own car industry relies on these really popular cars that aren't covered by this mandate. It just, things like that, it's like shooting yourself in the foot, isn't it? And Honda has obviously said, well, bugger that then, we'll just go to America.
And again, with Honda and Toyota, two of the larger international automakers that are in Canada, really don't have an EV to compete. Like, they don't even, they're further behind than Ford and GM in the EV world. And then let's look at this little graph here from Europe here. Europe's best-selling car in June 2025. This is not even just EVs. Best-selling car, Tesla.
That's very interesting.
And again, in Canada, Tesla tariffed. We tariffed it because obviously Elon Musk is what? He's not even Trump's friend anymore, but I guess that, that's not sticking anymore. But I guess he still must be, in Chrystia Freeland's words, a Nazi, or some of the Canadian media labeled him that. There you go.
White supremacist, I've seen that one used. Maybe that's what they'll move over to now.
Anyway, breaking, Grok 4 is coming right after July 4th. It says it's going to go in the car. Or Grok 4 is going to get released, sorry, not in the car. Grok 4 is going to get released, and it's supposedly going to be unbelievable. But that's according to Elon Musk. But and then it's supposed to be going in the cars.
Not necessarily unbiased.
It's supposed to be going in the cars right away. And the automakers are cautiously optimistic on the changes to the EV sales mandate after that meeting with Carney. But Carney said nothing about the EV mandate after his meeting. When he came out of the room, he just talked about Trump. And that's his typical MO. That's what he talks about, right? Because when he wants to avoid something, just if the first thing he says, let me be clear, and he does the finger thing, and then he says, let me be clear, we're going to get the best deal for Canada, it means he's avoiding having a discussion on what he's supposed to have a discussion on.
Maybe I'll apply for a job in Mark Carney's office, and when he's interviewing me and he asks me a question and I know that my answer's garbage, I'll just say something about Donald Trump instead. I'll just say, Well, yeah, on the point of my knowledge of physics, let's say, well, Donald Trump happened to cut a lot of funding for physics, and as a consequence, I don't know anything about physics. And then I suppose he'll be obliged to give me the job because that's his own logic, isn't it?
You got to do the finger thing, though. Let me be clear.
Yeah, physics.
In our health section today, this is just a reminder. Health is your wealth, right? When you have good health, you have lots of dreams and aspirations. If you're sick and needing help for your health, you only have one dream, and you got to think about your body as your car, like your automobile. Would you put garbage? If you have a fancy car, would you put sugar in the tank? Would you?
It's also your pension, isn't it? Would you give your pension away to McDonald's? I would, but would you?
There you go. It is every time you put we did that story yesterday where they're now saying it's on many outlets that any kind of processed meats not good for you, that it's linked to cancer. Imagine that. Pot, not good for you. Alcohol, not good for you. Processed meats, not good for you. And McDonald's meat, I don't think it's processed. It's just,
That's what God knows what it is, reconstituted or something.
I think you might want to avoid the chicken nuggets, that pink paste or whatever. But yeah. Well, There you go. And I got a clip here, and we're in the Fool of the Day section here. This one's going to be a little off color for anybody that doesn't like off color stuff. You have to close your eyes because this one here, no, we're going to pass that one and that one. We're going to get right down to, and you can sub this in. To me, I'd say this is, there's one person in this clip here that's elbows up. One person's a liberal, and one's a conservative. You can figure out who's who in this clip here. But the expression on the cat's face is unbelievable. Let's play this clip.
Somebody's watching me. It's my anxiety.
There you go. That's good.
Yeah.
That's we had a small Pomeranian that anytime he was stressed out, he had a stuffy that he would actually attack. Right after we took him to the vet or something, he would race home, and he would attack his stuffy. We had to actually throw the stuffy away, and then it ended. That was the end of it. But that stuffy was his thing. And we don't have management. We don't have much else there, but we're going to go out with this guy singing. This thing went viral a while ago, and just in recognition of our American friends south of the border here, we're going to serenade them out. We're going to play this clip, and that'll be the end of our show today and the end of our week today. And we're back next week on Monday at 9 a.m. Again, Gavin Dew will be here in about 20 minutes at 10:30. We're going to talk about the healthcare situation here in the Okanagan, Interior Health, and also in British Columbia in general. So come back at 10:30. But we're going to let this rendition to celebrate the American holiday there next door. Fireworks and everything, but down south, I'm sure they're going to play a lot of stuff. But here you go, and we'll see you tomorrow. We're just going to play this.
All things were gone. I've worked for all my life, and I had to start again with just my children and my wife. I thank my lucky stars to be standing here today. 'Cause the flag still stands for freedom, and they can't take that away. And I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. And I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. And I gladly stand up next to you and defend her still today. There ain't no doubt I love this land. God bless the USA.
We don't just report the news. We live here too. We're your neighbors, bringing you stories that matter to all of us. No government funding, no outside influence.